I always thought I knew my wife, Natalie, better than anyone else. After 12 years of marriage, we had everything in place. 2 beautiful daughters, Emily and Zoe, a cozy house in the small, peaceful town of Colorado, and lives that blended together perfectly. I was working as a project manager at a top architecture firm, while Natalie ran a small cafe that had become her passion. Life was simple, and yet it was filled with moments that made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. We were a team, supporting each other through every challenge, celebrating the good moments, and making it through the tough ones. Our home was a place of laughter, family dinners, and bedtime stories. The girls played outside in the yard, and Natalie and I would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. But recently, something had changed. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Natalie, who used to be the vibrant, cheerful woman I fell in love with, had become distant. She was always preoccupied, avoiding deep conversations, and seemed less interested in spending time together. I try not to let it bother me. After all, everyone goes through tough times. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I decided to confront her. We sat at the dinner table, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. I looked at her, the woman who had been my partner for over a decade, and asked the question that had been eating away at me. "Natalie, do you still love me?" She paused, the laughter in her eyes fading for a moment, before a forced smile crept onto her face. "Of course," she said, but her voice was flat, lacking the warmth that used to fill every word. I couldn't believe it. Something in her tone, in the way she spoke, made my heart sink. I knew she was lying, but I didn't know why. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but instead, I just nodded and forced a smile. From that night on, everything felt different. Every time I looked at her, I felt this quiet, growing unease. She began spending more time at the cafe, even on weekends, often staying late. She was always on her phone, her screen hidden from view whenever I came into the room. My suspicions grew, and I found myself questioning everything. Why was she so distant? What was she hiding from me? I tried to ignore it, to pretend that I was just being paranoid. But one morning, everything changed. I had returned early from work, hoping to surprise her, but instead, I overheard something that shattered my world. Natalie was on the phone with someone, her voice soft and familiar, and as I listened, my heart dropped into my stomach. "I know Jack," she said, her words filled with a tenderness I hadn't heard in years. "I'll tell him soon, but if he's already suspicious, what's he going to do about it?" Jack. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. Jack, a man she'd mentioned only a few times in passing as a friend from the cafe. But this wasn't just a friend. The way she spoke to him, so intimate, so affectionate, made my blood run cold. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I had to know the truth. As she ended the call and turned to find me standing there, I didn't wait for her to speak. The words just spilled out of me. "Natalie, I know about Jack," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "And one more thing, is Sophie really my daughter?" She froze, her face draining of color. There was no hiding anymore. The truth was out. Her silence spoke volumes. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she confessed. Sophie wasn't mine. She was the product of a relationship Natalie had with Jack before we got married. A child I had raised, a child I had loved as my own, wasn't mine at all. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my whole world crumble around me. I had been betrayed in the most painful way possible. But despite the storm of emotions raging inside me, I couldn't bring myself to yell, to scream at her. Instead, I walked away, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the lies, the betrayal, and the shattered life I had known. That night, I didn't sleep. The realization that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie kept me awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to escape the truth. I needed answers. I needed to know what had happened, what I had missed. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let her keep lying to me. Tomorrow, I would confront her, and I would get the truth, no matter what it cost me. The next day, I could barely bring myself to look at Natalie. She was in the kitchen, making breakfast for the girls, acting as though nothing had changed, as though everything was still the same. But I knew better. The silence between us was suffocating, and every glance felt like an accusation. I had spent the night thinking about everything. The phone call, her confession, the years of my life that now seemed like an illusion. I kept replaying those words in my head. Sophie isn't yours. How could I have been so blind? How could I have raised a child that wasn't even mine? The anger, the sadness, the feeling of betrayal. It all rushed through me, but still I stayed silent. I needed more than just a confession. I needed proof. Where's Sophie? I asked, my voice cold, though inside I felt like I was drowning. She's upstairs, getting ready for school, Natalie replied, not looking at me. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and pretend everything was fine. I walked to the living room, picked up my phone, and made a call to the clinic. I had already made my mind up. I would have a DNA test done. I needed to know for sure if Sophie was mine, even though the doubt had already planted itself deep in my heart. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks, getting Emily and Zoe ready for school, dealing with the usual chaos of family life. But my mind kept drifting back to Natalie, to Jack, and to Sophie. What was I supposed to do now? How could I ever trust her again? When the girls were gone and Natalie was busy cleaning up, I finally decided to confront her. I walked into the kitchen, where she was wiping down the counter. She didn't look up when I spoke. Who is Jack, Natalie? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. And why didn't you tell me about Sophie? She froze, her hand gripping the rag a little too tightly. I've already explained, Theodore, she said softly. But I could hear the unease in her voice, the cracks starting to show. I never meant for you to find out like this. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. You never meant for me to find out? How long did you think you could keep lying to me, Natalie? How long did you think I wouldn't notice? She turned to face me, her eyes filled with guilt and sadness. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. I didn't want to lose everything we built together. I already lost everything, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You've been lying to me, keeping secrets from me, and now I don't even know if I can trust you anymore. She broke down in front of me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Theodore. I should have told you sooner. But it's complicated. I didn't want to lose you too. Jack and I, it was before we met, before we got married. I was so scared of what it would mean for us, for our family. I stared at her, torn between wanting to comfort her and wanting to lash out in anger. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But how could I? After everything? I need time, I said, my voice cold and distant. I need to figure out what to do next. And with that, I walked away. I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had the DNA test scheduled for the next day, and my mind was too clouded with questions to focus on anything else. Was Sophie really mine? Or had I been living a lie all these years? The following day, I received the results. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the letter, my hands trembling. I knew what I would find, but I wasn't ready for it. Not yet. I opened the envelope slowly, my heart racing, and read the results. It was true. Sophie wasn't my daughter. I couldn't breathe. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt, and for a moment, I thought I would collapse. How could this be happening? I had raised her. I had loved her like she was my own. And now, everything was a lie. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at the paper in disbelief. Eventually, I felt myself snap back into reality. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it was falling apart around me. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my eyes, and made the hardest decision of my life. I would confront Natalie one last time. I would ask her everything I needed to know, and then I would make a choice. That evening, after the girls were in bed, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, the silence almost suffocating. The weight of the DNA test results sat heavily in my chest, and no matter how many times I tried to distract myself, my thoughts kept returning to one unbearable question. Why didn't you tell me? Natalie had been avoiding me all day, as if she knew the storm was coming. She was upstairs in our bedroom, probably lost in her thoughts, trying to figure out how to make sense of everything. But I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't keep living in this limbo of uncertainty. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my footsteps heavy. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, but then pushed it open. Natalie was sitting on the bed, her back to me, staring out the window as if lost in thought. "Natalie," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady, but it trembled with the weight of everything I had been holding inside. She turned slowly to face me, her eyes red from crying. "Theodore," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The pain in her voice was clear, but it didn't matter anymore. I had been living with pain for far too long. "I got the test results," I said, holding up the paper in my hand. "And I know the truth now. Sophie isn't my daughter." Her face paled, and she sank down onto the bed. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, but her words felt hollow, empty. "Then why did you lie to me for all these years, Natalie?" My voice cracked as the anger and hurt I had buried deep inside finally bubbled to the surface. "Why did you keep this from me? You let me raise a child that wasn't mine, and you never once thought to tell me the truth." "I didn't know how," she sobbed. "I didn't know how to tell you. It was a mistake, Theodore. It was before we got married, and I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose our family. You didn't think I had a right to know?" I said, my voice rising with frustration. "I had a right to know the truth from the very beginning." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible now. "I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted you to find out this way." The words hit me like a slap. She was sorry. She was sorry. That was all she could say after everything? After the years of betrayal, after raising Sophie as my daughter, after everything that had come crashing down around me? I wanted to scream, to yell, to demand an explanation for all of it. But something inside me told me to stop. I had heard enough. The truth was out there now, and nothing would ever be the same again. "I don't know what to do anymore, Natalie," I said, my voice shaky. "I don't know if I can keep living like this." She reached out for me, but I stepped back, not ready to forgive her. Not yet. I wasn't sure I ever would. "I still love you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I never stopped loving you." The words didn't reach me. They didn't matter. What mattered was the truth that had come out, the lies that had been built on top of it, and the family that was no longer the same. "I don't think I can do this anymore," I said, my voice hollow. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there, broken and crying. The truth had shattered everything. The next few days were a blur. I tried to focus on the girls, to pretend like I was still the man I used to be. But how could I? How could I be the father I wanted to be when I felt so lost, so betrayed? I spent hours thinking about what my life would be like now. The thought of leaving was constantly in my mind, but the thought of Sophie wasn't to blame for any of this. She was my daughter, my responsibility, and despite everything that had happened, I couldn't just walk away from her. I had to make a decision. And then, in a quiet moment, the answer came to me. I couldn't let Natalie's mistakes destroy everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for. I couldn't let the lies take away the love I had for my daughters. I had to stay for them. I had to be the father they deserved, even if that meant facing the painful truth every single day. Theodore, the father, the protector. I would be there for my girls, no matter what. The days after the confrontation felt like an endless cycle of numbness and anger. Every time I looked at Natalie, my mind raced with memories of the life we had built, and yet the weight of the betrayal was impossible to ignore. But amidst all the chaos, my children became my anchor. They didn't ask questions about what was happening between their mother and me. They didn't need to. They were innocent, and that's why I couldn't let this destroy me. I had to stay strong for them. Emily and Zoe kept me grounded, reminding me every day of what was truly important. Their laughter echoed through the house. Their playful bickering filled the spaces where silence had once lingered. I couldn't let them see the shattered pieces of their father's heart. I had to be their protector, their steady hand, no matter how broken I felt inside. As I spent more time with them, a plan began to form in my mind. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage, not with the weight of the betrayal hanging over us. But I also knew that I couldn't walk away from Sophie. She needed me. I had been there for her every moment of her life, and That wasn't something I could just abandon. The thought of sharing custody with Natalie, of having my children split between two homes, was a terrifying one. But I was determined to fight for them, to make sure they were okay. I didn't know what would happen to my relationship with Natalie, but I knew I had to do what was best for Emily, Zoe, and Sophie. That meant I would have to fight for custody, even if it meant going through a bitter and painful divorce. One evening, after the kids were asleep, I sat down with Natalie to talk. She was sitting on the couch, her hands wringing together nervously as she looked at me. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice steady but my heart pounding. "I'm not going to walk away from the girls. I'm not going to walk away from Sophie. She's my daughter, and I'm going to fight for her. For all of them." Natalie's face dropped, her eyes widening in shock. "What do you mean?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said, watching her closely. "But I'm not giving up on the girls. I'm going for full custody. I need to make sure they're okay. I need to make sure Sophie knows that I'm still her father, no matter what." She stared at me, her lips trembling, and for a moment, I could see the desperation in her eyes. "Theodore, please. We can work this out. We can." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "There's no fixing this, Natalie. Not after everything. I need to do what's best for them. For me." The silence between us was thick, heavy with the finality of it all. She looked like she was about to say something, but then stopped herself. She knew it was over, too. "I'll fight for Sophie, and I'll fight for the girls," I continued. "I will always be here for them, and I'm going to make sure they grow up knowing that they have a father who loves them." Natalie nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Theodore. I never meant for it to end like this." "I know you're sorry," I said, my voice softening just a little. "But that doesn't change anything. It's done." The divorce proceedings were tough. The tension between Natalie and me grew as we navigated the legalities of splitting our lives apart. But the one thing that kept me going was the thought of my children. I wasn't going to let them suffer because of our mistakes. The custody battle was brutal. Natalie fought hard, trying to convince the courts that she was the better parent, that she could provide a stable environment for the girls. But I knew in my heart that I had the right to raise them, to be the father they needed. Weeks of back and forth passed, filled with heated arguments and paperwork. But finally, after months of uncertainty, the judge ruled in my favor. I was granted full custody of Emily, Zoe, and Sophie. It wasn't easy. There were tears, there were moments of doubt, but in the end, I knew I had done the right thing. I had fought for my family, for the girls who needed me, and I would be there for them, no matter what. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, there would be moments when I doubted myself. But I had learned something through this entire ordeal. I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future. And for my daughters, I would fight to give them a future filled with love, honesty, and the security they deserved. As I sat on the porch, watching the sun set on the horizon, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The pain of the past was still there, lingering in the background, but it wasn't as all-consuming anymore. I had found my way back to my children, and I knew that with them by my side, I could face anything that came my way. Life had a way of knocking us down, but it also had a way of showing us who we truly are. And as I looked at Emily and Zoe playing together in the yard, I knew I had found my purpose once again, to be the father they needed, the man they could count on, and the protector of our family. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The pain of the betrayal had not disappeared, but it had become more manageable. Every time I looked at Emily, Zoe, and Sophie, I was reminded of why I fought so hard for them. They were my everything. They were my future. The process of rebuilding my life had begun, but it wasn't easy. I was learning to adjust to a new routine, one where I was fully responsible for my children's well-being, for their happiness. But the truth was, I wouldn't have it any other way. I had learned over the past year that I was stronger than I realized, and that strength came from the love I had for my daughters. There were difficult days when I doubted my decisions, days when the silence in the house felt too loud, and moments when the weight of everything I'd been through felt too heavy to carry. But then I'd hear Emily's laughter or Zoe's excitement as she came running to tell me about her day, and I would remember why I kept going. For them. One afternoon, as I was picking up the girls from school, I caught a glimpse of Natalie across the street. She was walking with her head down, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. It hurt to see her like that, but it also reminded me of how far we had come. It wasn't about hatred or anger anymore. It was about acceptance. We were no longer the people we used to be. We had both changed, and for better or for worse, we had to accept it. As I watched Natalie walk away, I realized that I no longer resented her. I was no longer angry. All I felt was a deep sadness, a recognition of how much we had lost, but also how much we had gained. I had my children, and they had me. That was what mattered. One evening, as I tucked Emily and Zoe into bed, I sat beside Sophie, who had always been the quietest of the three. She looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes, and my heart swelled with love. "Sophie," I said softly, "I know things have been hard, but I want you to know that you are my daughter. You've always been my daughter. Nothing can change that." She smiled at me, a small, shy smile, but it was enough. I could see in her eyes that she understood, and that was all I needed. I didn't have to be her biological father to love her. I didn't have to be perfect. I just had to be there for her. In the quiet of the room, I promised myself that I would always be the father she needed, no matter what. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. We found a new rhythm, a new sense of peace. The house was still the same, but it felt different. The silence that once consumed me had been replaced with the sounds of my children's voices, their laughter, and their joy. I had started to heal little by little, and so had they. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when the past would creep back in and threaten to pull me under. But I also knew that I was capable of more than I had ever given myself credit for. I had survived the hardest thing I'd ever faced, and I had come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, as I watched Emily and Zoe playing in the yard, and Sophie sitting beside me with her coloring book, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The storm that had once torn my world apart had finally passed. And though the scars remained, they were no longer something that defined me. They were reminders of how far I had come. I wasn't the same man I had been before the truth came to light, but that wasn't a bad thing. I had learned to be a better father, a better man. And that was enough. As the sun set on another day, I stood outside, looking at the world around me. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. I had the strength to face whatever came next. And as long as I had my girls by my side, I knew I could handle anything. We had been through the fire, but we had come out stronger. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope for what was to come. It had been 2 years since that fateful day when everything changed. The road to recovery had been long and painful, but it had also been filled with moments of unexpected beauty. I had learned that life could be rebuilt piece by piece if you were willing to fight for it. And fight I did because of my daughters. Emily, Zoe, and Sophie had all grown so much over the past couple of years. Emily had blossomed into a confident, thoughtful young girl, her creativity blossoming in ways I hadn't expected. Zoe, the free spirit, had embraced her love for sports, spending hours practicing soccer and cheering for her teammates. And Sophie, my Sophie, had become the glue that held our family together. Though she had learned of the truth about her biological father, the bond we shared remained unshakable. I had taken on a new job, one that allowed me to work from home more often. It meant fewer late nights and more time with my girls. I found myself at peace in the small, quiet moments, watching Emily study, hearing Zoe's excited stories about her school day, and sitting beside Sophie as we watched movies together. There were still days when I felt the ache of the past, but they were fewer now. My girls, with their laughter and love, had healed me more than anything else could. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, our table, the one where so many memories had been made, I looked at each of them. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and chatter about their day. But beneath it all, I felt the strength of the family we had created together. "Dad," Sophie said, glancing up from her plate, "can we go to the park tomorrow?" I smiled, my heart swelling. "Of course. We can go after lunch if you want. Can I bring my friends?" Emily added with a grin, always the social one. "Sure," I said. "The more the merrier." We finished dinner with the usual exchange of jokes and stories, and I felt for the first time in a long while that this was it. This was my life now, and I was finally okay with that. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how much had changed. How much I had changed. I had been tested in ways I never expected, and while the scars of the past would always be there, I now saw them as symbols of survival, not weakness. They were a testament to the strength I had found within myself and the love I had for my daughters. Theodore, the father, the protector, the man who had rebuilt his life from the ashes. I had finally become the man I wanted to be, not because of the things I had, but because of the people I had. My girls had made me a better man. They had shown me what truly mattered: love, honesty, and the strength to keep going no matter what. I could hear their laughter through the walls, the sound of them settling down for the night. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that, no matter what the future held, I was ready. I had my family, I had my strength, and I had the courage to face whatever came next. And that, I realized, was enough.